Chinese characters are stupid hard to learn for the simple reason that they're not phonetic, and the strokes give no reliable indication as to how you pronounce the characters. So when you're the newly established PRC where 90% of the peasants can't read, what do? We take the Chinese character and we throw it away. No, bro, you don't want to do that. Hiya, why not throw? Cause the Chinese characters, pretty cool. Oh, you really think so? Trust me, bro. Okay. So Chinese characters were saved from extinction, but the literacy rate was still a big problem in 1949, and for that, they devised two reforms. First, they would completely rehaul how characters were written by simplifying them to have less strokes. Second, they would create a new phonetic alphabet to standardize and record the pronunciation of these characters for Chinese people and foreigners abroad. The system they ended up choosing was called Hanyu Pinyin. And in this video, we'll go on the 350-year journey on how we got here. Oftentimes, people see Hanyu Pinyin as a modern invention, but the truth is, people have attempted to Romanize Chinese for a long time now. Hanyu Pinyin was not built from scratch, but based on the older systems that came before it. And to understand the full history, we would have to go back 450 years all the way to 1582 AD, when a little Italian man by the name of Matteo Ricci arrived on the shores of Macau. This is not Macau! Ricci was a Jesuit priest who had been in India for several years prior, and the church at the time was very eager to break into the Middle Kingdom and convert her people to Christianity. But upon entering China, he naturally encountered a problem. He didn't know any Chinese. Too bad he forgot to bring his Youdao Dictionary Pen 3, as that would have helped him out a lot. With the Youdao Dictionary Pen 3, our boy Matteo could have easily read Chinese books by simply scanning the text and getting an English translation. Once you scan the page, the pen reads the text out loud, and you can find the definition and pinyin pronunciation of individual words and save them for later. Unfortunately for Matteo, pinyin had not been invented yet, so he wouldn't be able to enjoy this feature until the 1956 patch update. The Youdao Dictionary Pen 3 charges with a standard USB-C port and is light enough to take anywhere you go, like your local library. So if you need to study quietly, this pen can also connect to your Bluetooth earbuds. The latest software supports both simplified characters as well as traditional characters, and you can also set your system language to English or Spanish. They will also be supporting Korean and Japanese here very soon, which I'm personally looking forward to. So if you're interested in getting yourself a Youdao Dictionary Pen 3, you can buy it today on their Amazon store or at their website, and use the code ABChinese, you'll get a nice 25% off discount. All of that and the links will be in the description down below, and thank you Youdao for sponsoring today's video. Now back to our boy Matteo. Despite forgetting his Youdao Dictionary Pen, he was eventually able to learn Chinese, and he would become the first person to ever attempt to Romanize Chinese. He recorded his system in his book Xi Zi Qi Ji, Miracle of Western Letters, which was published in 1605. Shortly after, in 1626, another Jesuit missionary published Aid to the Eyes and Ears of Western Scholars, which included his version of a Romanized Chinese. It's worth noting that these early attempts to Romanize Chinese were meant to teach foreigners how to speak Chinese and not meant for the Chinese people. The next significant update for Romanizing Chinese came in 1867, when the British ambassador Thomas Wade began work on what would later become known as the Wade-Giles System. Wade was also the first professor of Chinese at Cambridge University, and as the name implies, this system was later revised and also completed by a man called Herbert Giles, who actually succeeded Wade as the Chinese professor at Cambridge. This is the oldest system that is still in use today, and you'll see it in loanwords like Kung Fu, Tai Chi, or Kung Pao Chicken. Note, I'm pronouncing these like an American would. The correct pronunciations are actually Gong Fu, Tai Ji, Gong Bao. Taiwanese people also use Wade-Giles to spell out names. For example, Taiwanese singer Zhou Jielun, his name is Jay Chao, or Zhou is the correct pronunciation. One of the problems with Wade-Giles is that it relies on apostrophes to indicate aspirated consonants, and because they're often omitted, it leads a lot of words to be mispronounced or misrepresented. For example, Tai Chi, as it's commonly spelled, without an apostrophe is technically representing the sound Dai Ji and not the correct Tai Ji. Another early system that we still somewhat use today is the Chinese Postal System. This is why we say Peking duck and not Beijing duck, and why Tsinghua University is spelled like this. Basically, when the Imperial Post first opened in 1897, they needed a way to standardize place name spellings so that their Amazon packages don't get lost. And they looked around, and Wade-Giles was pretty popular, but there were two problems with Wade-Giles. It conformed too much towards the Beijing dialect and catered too much towards English spellings. And this was especially an issue because the first postmaster general in China was a French dude. And naturally the French hated the English, so instead they chose to use the Nanking syllabary that Giles had created, which better represented the southern dialects of China and most importantly catered less towards the English. It was also around this time that Chinese people themselves began work on developing a phonetic alphabet. After getting their butts kicked by Japan in the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing dynasty was like, well, hot diggity dog, we are falling behind technologically. Maybe we ought to teach the peasants how to read. But Chinese characters were too freaking hard to learn, so scholars decided that they needed to reform the language. They would create a phonetic alphabet to replace Chinese characters. Ooh. At least some people thought that. This was known as the 切音字运动, movement for a phonetic alphabet, and the idea of cutting up a Chinese character into initials and finals was popularized at this time, which became the basic concept behind pinyin. In roughly a 20-year span, many scholars came forth and proposed their ideas for reform, but unfortunately, none of them really caught on. Oh, and by the way, this whole time, a guy named Sun Zhongshan was leading a mostly peaceful protest in the background. No! God, please, no! No! Which eventually overturned the Qing dynasty in 1912. However, the efforts for language reform did not die out, but were reignited under the new leadership. Later that year, the Commission on the Unification of Pronunciation, Zhuyin Fuhao, was formed, and smart people from all over the world were tasked to create a phonetic system for the common Chinese language. Less than a year later, in 1913, one particular system was drafted, and it was based off the scribbly shorthand of a guy named Zhang Binglin, who was kind of a badass, and also a little crazy. This system became Zhuyin, and it was officially adopted in 1928. Some people see Zhuyin and Pinyin as total opposites because they're the only ones that are extensively used in modern times, Pinyin in mainland China and Zhuyin in Taiwan. However, in my opinion, they're actually quite similar. Pinyin is Zhuyin, just with a smaller set of Latin letters instead of some symbols. But a few other systems would first come on the scene before Pinyin was created. 国语罗马字, also known as GR, was developed in the 1920s by the Nationalist Party, and it had the unique characteristic of tonal spelling. So different letter combinations can be used to indicate the same vowel sound but a different tone. But as you can see from this chart, the large amounts of spellings made this system really confusing to learn. Its only application in modern times is in the spelling of two similar Chinese provinces, Shanxi and Shanxi. The double A here indicates that it's a third tone, shan, and not a first tone, shan. 拉丁化新文字, Wenz, or however you want to pronounce it in English, was developed in the 1930s by the Communist Party in conjunction with the USSR, and its goal was to improve literacy rates of ethnic Chinese in Eastern Russia, actually. But this system did not indicate tones at all. And finally, the Yale system was developed by Yale University in the 1940s, and it was mostly used to teach Americans Chinese. But as an American myself, I honestly feel like some of these spellings really do make sense for English speakers. Take a listen to these sounds. Trei, niu, ceng, zhi. What do you think? Okay, now we're in the 1950s, the Communist Party have just won the Civil War, and the funny thing is they've got the exact same problem as the Qing dynasty did 50 years ago. They're underdeveloped and the people are illiterate. And this is exactly where we were at the start of the video. As early as 1949, the Committee for Reforming the Chinese Written Language was formed, headed by Wu Yuzhang. Once again, the committee brought all kinds of talented people to the table to try to come up with the best possible solution for a modern Chinese language. No fewer than 600 different proposals were submitted for consideration, including those based on strokes, Latin alphabets, shorthand, and others. And in 1954, a world-renowned linguist by the name of Zhou Youguang was asked to join the team. Except he wasn't exactly a linguist. And he was definitely not world-renowned. The dude was an economist. He even had a stint banking on Wall Street. But when his bank dispatched him to work in Europe in 1946, he got interested in Western alphabets and started watching TikToks on writing systems. He may have written a few articles about his findings, so the committee took notice and slid into his DMs. Zhou Youguang began work on Hanyu Pinyin in 1955, and the system was officially announced to the world on February 11th, 1958. Zhou revealed in a 2012 interview with BBC that people made fun of him for taking 3 years just to deal with 26 letters. But to be fair, the college I went to spent almost $1 million to rebrand their slogan to We Fly. So Zhou Youguang is given credit for the creation of Pinyin, and he's often called the father of Pinyin. He dedicated the remainder of his life to linguistics, and he lived until the ripe old age of 111 years old. His work will certainly outlive him though, as Hanyu Pinyin was officially adopted by various national and international bureaus in the 1980s, and even by Taiwan in 2009. To some purists who admire the Chinese language for Chinese characters, you may wonder why we even need a Romanized alphabet. But there are actually a lot of advantages to Pinyin that you may not have thought of. Pinyin is first and foremost a phonetic system to record and standardize the pronunciation of the spoken language. It's kind of wild to think that in ancient China, the spoken language was actually passed down verbally and never recorded in writing, because Chinese writing is not phonetic. Pinyin also standardizes Chinese names and proper nouns in a foreign setting where Chinese characters cannot be used. And its foundation in the Latin alphabet is a huge advantage in international business, where English is king. Within China, Pinyin is used to help children learn proper pronunciations and assist them to read characters when they're young, and even Chinese adults rely on Pinyin at times for rare characters like biang biang noodles. Because Pinyin is alphabet-based, it also makes it possible to telegraph codes, to write in Braille for the blind, and fingerspell for the deaf. And not to mention, most Chinese people use Pinyin to type on their computers or on their cell phones. So Hanyu Pinyin will likely never replace Chinese characters as the written language, but is certainly here to stay in conjunction to characters as a phonetic alphabet. It's not the first phonetic system for Chinese, but it will likely be the last.